Sometimes the hardest part about setting boundaries isn't actually setting them. It's what comes after. It's the distance, the silence, the realization that some relationships don't feel the same anymore. And the part no one really talks about is the grief that comes with choosing yourself. Hey there, and welcome to Mama Drama and Trauma. I'm your host, Jenny Kimmel, and today, this is one of those episodes that feels really honest and maybe a little uncomfortable, but in a necessary way. Because this isn't about how to set boundaries. This is about what happens after you do. I think we hear a lot about how boundaries are empowering, how they protect your peace, how they help you grow. And all of that is true, but what doesn't get talked about as much is what changes because of them. The relationships that start to feel different, the conversations that don't happen the same way anymore, the space that slowly gets created, and the emotions that come with that. Because even when you know you're doing the right thing, even when you know you're protecting yourself, that doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean there isn't a part of you that misses what used to be. So today, I'm not here to tell you what you should do. I'm just here to share what this has looked like for me, what it's felt like, what's changed, and the parts of it that I didn't expect. So if you're in a place where things feel different, where relationships don't feel the same, or where you're learning to choose yourself in a way you never have before, just know you're not alone in that. The relationship before the boundary. When I think about boundaries, I don't think about one specific relationship. I think about patterns that showed up in my marriage, in a friendship, and even in the way I show up as a mom. And when I really sit with it, I can see a version of myself in all of those relationships that was constantly giving, adjusting, explaining, trying to keep everything smooth, trying to keep everyone okay. And I don't think I even realized I was doing it at the time. It just felt normal. It felt like this is what you do when you care about people. In my marriage, a lot of it looked like reacting to things that were said, to tone, to opinions, to moments that would just pull me in. And I remember thinking, why does this bother me so much? Why am I letting this take over my mood? And even deeper than that, why can't I just let it go? But I didn't stop. I stayed in it. I engaged. I responded. I got worked up. And I can remember moments where my whole body felt it, like that tight feeling in your chest, your mind racing, going over what was said, replaying it, thinking about what you should have said differently. And it didn't just stay in that moment. It carried into the rest of my day. It carried into how I showed up with my kids, how I felt about myself. And looking back now, I can see how much energy I was giving away in those moments. Energy I didn't even realize I was losing. Energy that added up over time. And at some point, something in me started to shift. Not all at once, just little thoughts, little pauses, moments where I would catch myself and think, why am I doing this? Why am I letting this affect me like this? Why does this have so much control over how I feel? And those moments started to matter. They didn't change everything right away, but they planted something. They made me start paying attention. In a friendship, it showed up differently. That one was more about giving, showing up, being there, doing thoughtful things, creating moments, creating connection. And I love that. That part of me is genuine. I like making people feel seen, appreciated, valued. I like doing things that make someone feel special. That's who I am. But toward the end, something started to feel off. Not obvious at first, just small things. Moments where I felt like I had to explain myself or justify something that didn't feel like it needed explaining. And I remember thinking, why am I defending this? Why do I feel like I have to prove something that I know is true? And it didn't feel like one big issue. It felt like a buildup, little moments stacking on top of each other, and I started noticing something else. It stopped feeling fun. It stopped feeling easy. It stopped feeling like a place I could just be myself. And instead, it started to feel like something I had to manage. Like I had to think about what I said, how I said it, how it might be taken. And I remember sitting with that feeling and thinking, this doesn't feel good anymore. This doesn't feel like connection. It feels like pressure. It feels like I'm constantly trying to make something make sense. And I've been in that place before. That feeling of needing to explain yourself just to be understood. That's not new for me. And I think that's why it stood out so much. Because I didn't want to go back to that version of myself. I didn't want to go back to feeling like I had to shrink parts of me or over-explain parts of me just to keep something okay. With my kids, it's different. It's not about losing connection. It's about changing how I show up. Because I've always been the one to step in, help, fix, do. And for a long time, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. That's what a good mom does. You make things easier. You take care of things before they become a problem. But now I'm starting to pause and think, is this helping them or is this just easier for me? Am I stepping in because they need me or because it's uncomfortable for me to watch them figure it out? And that's a hard place to sit. Because there's a part of me that wants to jump in, that wants to fix it, that wants to make it better right away. And then there's another part of me that knows that's not always what they need. Sometimes they need to feel it. Sometimes they need to struggle a little. Sometimes they need to figure it out on their own. And that's hard as a mom because you feel that pull in both directions. You feel the instinct to protect and the responsibility to prepare them. And that's a boundary too, not one that pushes them away, but one that helps them grow. And when I look at all of this together, I can see it clearly now. I was over-giving, over-explaining, overextending, not because anyone told me to, but because that's who I thought I needed to be. The moment everything shifted. There wasn't one moment where everything changed. There wasn't a breaking point where I thought, I can't do this anymore. It didn't happen like that. It was slower. It was quieter. It was something that built over time. After everything that happened in my marriage, everything falling apart, everything shifting, I had to rebuild, not just my life, but myself. And I don't think I realized at the time how much of me I had lost in all of it. Because when you're in survival mode, you don't stop and reflect. You don't sit with your feelings and try to understand them. You just keep going. You do what you have to do. You get through the day. You take care of what needs to be taken care of. And I did that. I showed up. I kept moving. I handled what was in front of me. And from the outside, That probably looked like strength, but it was a different kind of strong. It wasn't grounded. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't coming from a place of knowing myself. It was just necessary. It was survival. And there's a difference because survival strength doesn't ask questions. It doesn't pause. It just pushes through. And that's where I lived for a while, but eventually things started to slow down. Not all at once, just enough for me to start noticing things. Little moments where I wasn't distracted, moments where I actually had space to think. And that's when the questions started coming up. Questions I had never really asked myself before. What actually feels good to me? What makes me feel calm? Not just in the moment, but in my body. What makes me feel overwhelmed, even if I try to push through it? And I remember sitting with those questions and realizing I didn't really have clear answers. And that felt strange because I thought I knew myself. But when I really thought about it, I realized I had spent so much of my life focused on everyone else, what they needed, what they wanted, what would make things easier for them. How to keep things running smoothly, how to keep people happy, how to avoid conflict. And somewhere in all of that, I stopped paying attention to myself. I stopped noticing what actually felt good to me and what didn't. So when I finally asked myself, what does Jenny need? It wasn't an easy answer, not at first, because it wasn't just about what I wanted. It was about what my body needed, what made me feel safe, what made me feel calm, what made me feel like I could just be without tension. And when I started paying attention to that, things became clearer. I realized I don't do well in chaos. I don't do well in constant movement, constant pressure. That kind of energy overwhelms me. Even if I can function in it, it doesn't feel good. And when I thought about where I do feel calm, I kept going back to the same place. Simple moments, quiet moments, being outside, a porch swing, fresh air, space to breathe, no pressure, no expectations, just stillness. That's where I feel like myself. That's where I feel grounded. And once I really understood that, I couldn't ignore the things that were pulling me away from it. I couldn't keep putting myself in situations that left me feeling unsettled, tense, drained, and just tell myself to deal with it. Setting boundaries didn't feel scary, but it did feel heavy because I wasn't afraid of the boundary itself. I was thinking about the other person. How would they feel? Would this hurt them? Would they think I was being mean? And I remember feeling that pull, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to be kind, wanting to not hurt anyone, and thinking, that's not who I am. I don't want to be someone who causes pain. But then another thought came in, a quieter one, but stronger. What about me? What about how this feels for me? What about what I need? And that's where the shift really started. Not in one big moment, but in that question. Because once I asked it, I couldn't ignore the answer. If I keep choosing everyone else, I'm going to keep losing myself. And I had already lost enough of myself. I couldn't keep doing that anymore. What changed after? When I started setting boundaries, things changed. Not dramatically, not overnight, but in a way that was very clear. It wasn't loud, it wasn't obvious to everyone else, but I could feel it. In that friendship, The communication stopped. There wasn't a big ending, no closure, no final conversation where everything made sense. Just distance. And I remember sitting in that thinking, is this really how it ends? After everything we shared, after all the time, the conversations, the connection, this is how it ends. And then another thought came in. Maybe this is what needed to happen. Not because I wanted it to, but because I knew I couldn't keep going the way things were. I couldn't keep explaining myself. I couldn't keep defending who I am. I couldn't keep having the same conversation in different ways, just hoping it would land differently. And I remember feeling that shift in me, where I just didn't have it in me anymore. Not in a frustrated way, just in a clear way. Like, I'm done trying to make this make sense. And even though the silence felt strange, it also felt peaceful. And that was confusing at first because you don't expect peace to come from distance. You expect peace to come from resolution, from understanding, from things being worked out. But sometimes peace comes from stepping away, from not engaging, from not trying to fix something that isn't yours to fix. With my ex-husband, the change looks like separation, minimal communication, no emotional engagement, and that didn't happen right away. That was something I had to learn because before, I would have responded, I would have engaged, I would have tried to explain myself or make something make sense or get clarity. And I remember catching myself in those moments, wanting to respond, wanting to say something, and then thinking, what is this going to change? Is this actually going to bring me peace, or is it just going to pull me back into something I've already stepped out of? And that was new for me, letting something go without needing to resolve it, without needing to have the last word, without needing to feel understood. And now I just let it be. I don't react the same way. I don't give it the same energy. And that has brought me a level of peace that I didn't even realize I was missing. With my kids, it looks different. It looks like structure. It looks like consistency. It looks like holding boundaries, even when they push back. And I'll be honest, that's hard because there are moments where I feel that pull. Should I just give in? Should I just make this easier right now? Because it would be easier. In the moment, it always is. But then I take a step back and I remind myself that's not what's best for them, and it's not what's best for me either. Because every time I give in when I know I shouldn't, I'm not just teaching them something, I'm teaching myself something too. And that matters. Emotionally, what surprised me the most was the relief. Relief in not having to explain myself. Relief in not feeling like I have to prove anything. Relief in not carrying conversations in my head long after they've already happened. Relief in knowing that I'm protecting my peace. There's been some guilt, especially in that friendship, because I never wanted someone to feel hurt. And I remember sitting with that, thinking, did I handle that right? Could I have done something differently? Did I give up too soon? And then I had to ask myself something harder. Or was I finally choosing myself? Was I finally stepping out of something that didn't feel good anymore? And that's when it became clear. This wasn't about giving up on someone else. This was about not giving up on me, and I had to choose. And this time, I chose me. The grief no one talks about. Even when you know you did the right thing, There's still grief, and not always in the way you expect, because you don't always grieve the relationship as it ended. You grieve it as you remember it. You grieve the version that felt good. The laughter, the connection, the moments that felt easy, natural, real. And what's hard is your mind doesn't go back to the difficult parts first. It doesn't go back to the moments where something felt off or where you felt drained or misunderstood. It goes to the good. And I remember catching myself thinking, was it really that good? Or am I just remembering it that way? And that's a strange place to sit because you start questioning your own experience. You start wondering, did I miss something? Did I ignore things that didn't feel right? Or is this just what grief does? And I think that's something we don't talk about enough. How grief can soften the edges of what actually was. How it can take something complicated and turn it into something that feels simpler than it really was. And in doing that, it can make you question yourself. For me, I realized I wasn't grieving what those relationships could have become. I was grieving what I believed they already were. And that's a completely different kind of grief because it's not about losing potential. It's about realizing something you trusted, something you felt wasn't actually what you thought it was. And that takes time to process because you're not just letting go of a person, you're letting go of a version of the story you held onto, a version that felt safe, that made sense, that you believed in. I went through that in my marriage. I truly believed I knew him. I truly believed in what we had. And when everything came out, it shifted everything. Not just how I saw him, but how I saw the entire relationship. And there were moments where I sat with that and thought, how did I not see this? Was it always there and I just didn't notice? And those thoughts can spiral if you let them, because they don't just question the relationship. They make you question yourself, your judgment, your awareness, your ability to see things clearly. And that's a hard place to sit. In that friendship, it felt similar in a different way because it didn't fall apart all at once. It shifted slowly. And I remember feeling that before I could explain it. That sense of something's different. Something doesn't feel the same. And then later thinking, when did that happen? When did it stop feeling easy? When did it stop feeling like a place I could just be myself? And there's not always a clear answer. Sometimes it just changes and you feel it before you understand it. I do miss connection, not necessarily the connection I had in my marriage, but the feeling of having that kind of connection with someone. That depth, that familiarity, that comfort of knowing someone and being known. And in that friendship, I miss the fun. I miss the version of it that felt light, effortless, and enjoyable. The version where I didn't have to think about what I was saying or how it would be taken. I could just be. But at the same time, I can recognize that it wasn't healthy anymore. And that's the part you have to hold, both things at once. You can miss it and still know it wasn't right for you. You can love someone and still need distance. You can care and still choose yourself. And I think the hardest part of all of this is accepting that both of those things can be true. Because we want it to be simple. We want it to be either good or bad, right or wrong, but it's not. It's layered, it's emotional, it's complicated, and letting go of people you love, even when it's the right decision, doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It just means you're choosing yourself anyway. Choosing yourself anyway. I'm still learning. This isn't something I have completely figured out. It's something I'm working through in real time. And I think that's important to say because I don't want this to sound like I've arrived somewhere. I haven't. I'm still in it, still noticing things, still catching myself, still learning what this actually looks like day to day. But I can say I'm showing up differently for myself now, and that's new. I'm starting to think about myself first, and even saying that out loud still feels uncomfortable sometimes because for so long, I thought putting myself first meant I was being selfish, like I was taking something away from someone else. And I remember those thoughts coming up. Is this wrong? Am I being too much? Am I not considering other people enough? And those thoughts don't just disappear. They still show up sometimes, but now I don't let them lead. I notice them, but I don't follow them. Now I pause and I check in with myself. Before I react, before I respond, before I give my energy to something, I take a second and I ask myself, how is this going to feel for me? Not just right now, but after. Is this going to bring me peace? Or is this going to leave me feeling drained? Is this something I actually want to give my energy to? Or is this something I feel obligated to respond to? And that question has changed a lot for me because it slows everything down just enough for me to make a different choice. Before, I would react quickly. I would respond based on how someone else felt or what they needed, and now I give myself that moment. And sometimes that moment is all it takes to do something different. I've learned that I need calm and steady. I need an environment that doesn't constantly overwhelm me. And once I really understood that, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't keep putting myself in situations that left me feeling unsettled, anxious, drained, and just tell myself to deal with it. Because I've done that. I've pushed through things that didn't feel good. I've stayed in situations longer than I should have. I've ignored that feeling in my body that was telling me something wasn't right. And I don't want to do that anymore. And that's where choosing myself comes in. It's not loud. It's not this big announcement. It's actually really quiet. It shows up in small moments. It looks like saying no, even when it would be easier to say yes. It looks like not engaging, even when you feel pulled to respond. It looks like standing your ground, even when part of you wants to just smooth things over. And that's not always easy because I still care. I still think about how people feel. I still don't want to hurt anyone. That part of me hasn't changed. But what has changed is that I don't ignore myself anymore. I don't push past what I feel just to keep someone else comfortable. And that's a shift. Because for a long time, I didn't even realize I was doing that. I thought I was just being a good person. I thought I was just being kind. But there's a difference between being kind and losing yourself in the process. And I've learned that the hard way. So if someone feels guilty for setting boundaries, I understand that. I felt that too. I still feel it sometimes. But at some point, you have to recognize what you're choosing. You're choosing yourself, or you're choosing someone else. And if you keep choosing someone else, you slowly start losing who you are. And I've been there. And I don't want to go back to that version of me. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you don't love people. It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're shutting people out. It just means you're finally including yourself in the equation. And for me, that's what this looks like now. Paying attention to what I need, protecting my peace, and making sure that I'm showing up for myself the same way I've always shown up for everyone else. At the end of all of this, what I really want you to take with you is this. It's okay to still love someone and let them go. It's okay to miss the connection and still choose distance. And it's okay to let go of the hurt so you don't have to carry the weight of someone else's choices anymore. If this episode resonated with you and you're in a place where you're trying to work through some of this, I do have a free journal on my website. It's called Choosing Love That Chooses You, and it's just a gentle place for you to start processing some of these feelings on your own. You can find that at www.mommadramaandtrauma.com. And if you want to keep having these conversations with me each week, you can follow my podcast anywhere you're listening. And if you feel called to, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed as well. That helps other people who need these conversations find the podcast too. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Momma Drama and Trauma. As always, you are strong, you are worthy, and your story matters. Until next time, take care of you.